how do you get people to listen and think? I believe it depends on your perspective. And you really, like, everybody has a choice. Like, we can see what's in front of us, but this is why, like, as a photographer, you can take 10 people, we can all photograph the exact same thing and view it differently because we're individuals, right? We're individuals, but there is a choice. There are some very basic things that, like, even a child would understand, right? So when you say that, hey, and we've seen it, like, well, we haven't. This whole idea, all of a sudden, after all these years of voting, the vote is being stolen. Elections are being stolen. I don't know where that came from. Like, well, I do, and then I don't. Because it's because it's like forever that we have done some stuff. But now, all of a sudden, it's threatened, right? Like, it's threatened. So this whole idea of how do we preserve the life we have, I see it as something like that's really black and white. You either operate from a place of fear, or you are coming from a place of hope and everybody gets a piece. Fear puts you in the mindset that in order for me to survive, I have to keep somebody else down. It's that zero-sum game mentality.
Yeah.
Because what you do in your house ain't got nothing to do with me, right? Certainly we vote on property taxes. Everybody's like, I don't want to pay more property taxes. So we all agree on that. Yeah. Everybody agrees on that. But then all of a sudden it becomes, well, I don't believe that you should be using charcoal. Like, you really should be doing a slow wood burning. It's like, you know, it overreaches. We go too far.
Yeah.
So we know there are some very basic things we agree to. And then it becomes a matter of your fear jumps in. Now, some of the fears are very real. I'm going to speak from a place of although I have been told I am in the minority, there are more people of color than there are of those who are of Caucasian descent. It is what it is. But you keep telling the story of, well, you know, you really don't want to get behind so-and-so, and you don't really want to do this, and think about how they've treated you, and think about it's like, but I'm looking at all of the things. I know that if I go a certain way, how I'm impacted, how my kids are impacted, how my great grandkids, like, I know how they're impacted. And I also know how far we have come and we are still fighting for.
Right.
So my fear is still very real. Like, I was playing Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, and he talked about trigger happy policing. That hasn't ended yet, and it's 2024. So that fear is real. However, the stereotypical fear is being fed that drag queens are coming for your children, and they're trying to make your kids do these really awful things. It's like, cut that out. Like that's just not real. It's not real. And that fear of the unknown is what drives a lot of people to believe that here's my only option, that I have to stop people from, like, do you really care? And I hate to say it like this, but then again, I don't. Do you really care about the woman who's going in there to have an abortion to save her life, or because she can't financially afford to take care of this child? Do you really care about the sanctity of life? Because if you cared about that, then we wouldn't have the current situation we have right now, where you have a pipeline to prison for Black and brown children. You wouldn't have that if you really believed in the sanctity of life. You would say, hey, these people, this lady, this guy, they should never procreate. Now, I know that's pushing it, but you should never procreate. So if someone says, hey, I don't believe we are fiscally responsible, financially ready, emotionally ready to bring a child into this world, why would you say, well, you've already started? Not personally, I believe in abstinence. I believe in it. I think did they ever tell you about that? About me and my nephew was born when I was a junior in high school. Scared me straight. I put on a chastity belt until I was like 32, 33 years old. I kid you not. There wasn't a thing a guy could say to me that would say, well, maybe no, because I'm not going down that road. That's a hell no. I, I do believe that when you are emotionally ready, financially ready to get involved in some of those sexual encounters, then yeah, I'm all for that. But I also believe that I'm not going to force somebody to bring someone into this world. That's just like that, because now it becomes a spiral effect. You got kids, and I think about the 90s where you had kids having kids. And look at those kids now. That's a different conversation. We're not gonna talk about kids today.
That's not today's. That's when we hit the women's rights and bodily autonomy.
Right. Yes. I will. Let me mark that down. We're gonna talk.
Mark that down. Well, and one of the things that you're talking about, I think, I feel like so when we talk about freedom, right? I think that one of the things people need to examine is when I say I want freedom, like I want the freedom not to wear a mask or the freedom to have access to medical care. The question I think then you have to ask is, do I want that same freedom for people who aren't like me? And if I don't, then I think what you want is entitlement. So if I genuinely believe in freedom, right, then I think everybody deserves equal access to whatever that is. If I believe in entitlement, then what I believe is that I have the right to do something, and I'm not really worried about anyone else's rights to do their thing. And I feel like that's one of the shell games we're playing, is that a lot of the pundits and a lot of the rhetoric that goes around is actually entitlement clothed in the word freedom.
I agree with that, because I have said multiple times that, people who are neo-Nazis and whatever else, they have every right to get together and do what they do. They have the right to do that. Like, everybody has that right. I may not believe in it. I don't support that kind of behavior, but they have every right to get together and share how they all hate people who are not like them, blah, blah, blah. Again, I fear, but whatever. But they have every right to do it. The only thing the only check mark is, okay, so now when you decide to impact others with that, as in like attacking them or what have you, we have gone too far. Because now it's a problem. That's not do your stuff. But when you start terrorizing people, that's a different act. That is not just we're coming together to share our hate for whomever. That is that's terrorism. Yeah, I do agree. Well, entitlement,
entitlement. Well, and it's there's that old litmus test for where's the line between your rights and my rights. Because there has to be. When we talk about rights, we usually talk about individual rights. And really, we also need to be talking about community rights. So we need to be able to live in a community that lives in harmony, which means our individual rights need to be abridged a little. And one of the litmus tests that I grew up with in my American Civil Liberties class or whatever is, I have the right to wave my hand around in the air as much as I want. My right to do that stops at your face. And the law probably says maybe it stops an inch from your face, right? Because we have to have a buffer. Technically, it stops right at your face or your body. But we maybe need to say or 6 inches out, because at the point that it goes past the 6 inches, you don't know if I'm going to abridge your rights, and then you have a right to stop my hand. Yes. And that the community rights, the right of the community to live in harmony, requires that I respect that 6 inches, right? Or I start to create problems that affect you and me and the rest of the group. And I feel like that's one of the things that we keep skipping. Like when we talk about freedom or entitlement, we talk about it in the scope of one person, an individual, instead of saying, all right, what is the community's freedom? How do we all have the freedom to practice our different religious beliefs? That's one right that requires the community to abridge their rights a little bit. So we can't just say one day is the Sabbath, because different religions have different Sabbaths. Sabbaths.
Yes.
status. And so I think that that's the other piece, and that, you know, to segue into like Project 2025, when I look at it, it ignores a basic civil liberties litmus test. Like I said, I learned that in my class about how to form a free and just society is to recognize that my rights end where yours begin. Like you were saying, if you want to be a neo-Nazi or you know, foolishly support the New England Patriots, I'm going to be okay with that.
Damn it.
Or
the Dallas Cowboys.
But you get to make me buy into that. That's where my rights come in. And that's why the law needs to be more respectful of the, and we keep framing it as this, like, it's about like one community or another. It's not. It's about the whole community having the right to coexist peacefully and to have a long and large spectrum of personal rights as part of that. But the more that we make it about one group or another, the more those rights get abridged for all but kind of one group.
There is an unspoken expectation that people as in like citizens understand how to interact and compromise. I'm going to use a very basic: sneezing in public.
Yes.
Now, I have always been taught that you use a tissue or, you know, a Kleenex, or you cover your mouth, you put it, you know, I've always been taught that. And then yet and still there are people who, when they're out in public, they just sneeze out in the wilderness as if it's just free game, right? It's like, first of all, it's disgusting. It's disgusting because your little particles are all out in the world now.
We know after COVID that we are breathing in other people's droplets, and it's disgusting.
Right. It's disgusting, right? So, I mean, you can't stop all of them, but you can stop a few if you cover your mouth, if you wash your hands, or you touch something else. So we know some very basic things, but okay, I'm sorry. You have to believe in science to do that, but whatever. But we know some very basic things of decorum, that you're not going to go out and do certain things because we as the society has decided this is just kind of gross. Yes, human bodies are disgusting. We got a lot of weird shit going on inside. Okay. Smells and everything. But as a society, we have agreed there are a few things we just don't do. We don't want to clip toenails at the restaurant. We want you to walk in with shoes and a shirt on. And, you know, like there are these very basic things. And yet, and still, we will find people who are like, well, it's my right to come in here. And if I feel like sneeze, I have to sneeze. So I didn't cover my mouth. And that's what I call entitlement. That when you put everybody else at risk for you to do the one simple thing that everyone else has agreed to not do. Like we've all agreed we're going to cover our mouths. Or that we're going to, and when you don't, you get the crazy crap. It can happen in your house when someone decides to not do something to keep food or whatever sanitary, and they touch this, they touch that, and then the whole entire home is now ill. Right. So even in the household, it's like we have agreed that we're all going to wash our hands and do this and blah, blah, blah. And somebody didn't do it because now we're all sick or whatever the case may be. But there are people who have that entitlement of, oh, well, it restricts my breathing, or I can't use a Kleenex because it makes my face dry. There's always these reasons. And I'm thinking, okay, if that's the case,
don't go out when you're sneezing.
Don't go out. Or send somebody else in. Now, years ago, that probably wouldn't be an option. But nowadays, there are so many options to do things. So we now live differently. That when it comes down to, well, I just have to do this. You don't have to just do this. You're choosing to do something to cause chaos, which I don't understand. I don't understand the point of causing chaos. Like, what's your point? You're trying to prove something? I don't know. But let's do this before we go down. Let's go into the frame. Part. So, what is on today's menu, my dear? It is Project 2025. That is it. That is on. It is sponsored primarily by the Heritage Foundation. We know there are other conservative think tanks that have all participated in this. It is a huge, huge thing that I every time I try to read it, I get like a bottle, not a glass, but a bottle of tequila or something, and I still just can't get through it. It's so out there that for some people, as you were mentioning earlier, some people think this just couldn't happen. But the fact of the matter, it is already happening. So we know it's not that far-fetched. Some people think, but there are people in place to stop it, like the Supreme Court. Well, they're still humans who will do what humans do. They are not a end-all be-all fail-safe to protect all people. So there's that. So I have a quick synopsis, and then we can get into it. It says Project 2025 is a far-right conservative plan to build now for a conservative victory through policy, personnel, and training under a conservative president in 2025. It has gone viral for its nearly 1,000-page list of alarming policies that will impact generations of Americans. Now, here's the plus, because I don't know if you found any numbers. I couldn't find any numbers on how many citizens are aware of it, because it's been around for a very long time, like 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
It's not brand new. The Heritage Foundation has been around since the Reagan era, so check that out. So it's a matter of playing the long game, right? So there is that. But there's more talk about it now, I believe, partially because there are a few representatives who have brought it up, but you also have the power of TikTok and YouTube on your side.
Right.
Instagram, I believe there was one person I knew, and I say that I followed, who on a consistent basis talked about it, and then they just went poof. I'm like, okay, so they're no longer in Meta. Are we doing the shadow ban thing? So no offense to Meta, I just don't. But TikTok and YouTube, there have been many people who have talked about it. And so there is far more talk about it now. I want to say just this past weekend or so, MSNBC even talked about it for like a hot second. I thought, oh, so now you want to pick up something that we should be talking about like years ago, but whatever. But did you find any numbers on perhaps people who are aware of it?
I feel like I feel like there's not many, but it's I mean, it's all guess. I mean, I don't find any numbers on who's aware of it. I did read that the mandate for leadership, I wanted to double check it, was actually published in 1981.
Thank you.
Which, what the heck?
Yeah, they've been working on it for a very long time. I mean, they have been working on it for a very long time. And so when people say, oh, it's just 4 years, it's like, it's not just 4 years. These people have been waiting for forever for the right puppet to be put in place to let this go, because it's not about the person. It's the long game. There's like, we don't care who it is. We just need one person to follow this plan, and it's going to change it for years to come, generations to come. So that's the catch on that. But they've been waiting for a very long time. And if we want to do a quick dive into some of the highlights, I say some of the highlights because, again, if you want to go through all 1,000 pages, people, I've had 2 people I know who have done it. And one guy said he had to go take a shower, kind of like the crying game, because it was just that bad. It's so bizarre. It's bizarre. And when I hear people talk about stuff and they only talk about surface level, that I go to a place of, do you even know what you're really supporting? Because it's easy to say. It's like I told you, like when people do polls, and back in 2000, I did the census. I was an enumerator. I had the West Village in New York City. Very cool. But you ask people questions and they are allowed to answer as they see fit. So I could see somebody who technically was any other ethnicity. But when I asked them, and how do you see yourself? They said, I see myself as being white. And that's what we checked on the box, right? So you can see the world as you want to see the world. When I think about these policies, And I think about the polls currently happening, and we talked about this. When you ask people very broad questions to craft a story, American citizens want to see change in the government.
Mm-hmm.
You know how broad that is? Because this kind of change. So one of the highlights, Department of Education would no longer exist.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some folks say, who cares? Okay, well, I don't know if people have noticed the number of states pushing for voucher programs, charter schools, private, because you know that's just money. Right? Just like all the private prisons, which not for this topic, not today. But
we have so many topics.
Girl, we keep them coming. We keep them coming. In the book, in this mandate, it says federal education policies should be limited, and ultimately the federal Department of Education should be eliminated. So now the states and local governments get to choose who gets funding.
Right.
And when you immediately think about, would my children be impacted? Because we've already seen what they do in Florida when it comes to kids who are transgender, LGBTQIA plus. The Black kids, I mean, they're trying to teach Black kids that slavery, it was a benefit to you and yours. So consider how that impacts everything that we do, whether you have kids in school or not. Your great-grandkids, my granddaughter, my niece and nephews would be impacted by this policy.
Yeah. Well, and so for example, like what you're saying, I think is really important in that right now, this isn't in effect. We don't have a federal, and to a certain extent, the Texas decides what people learn. So we already have a pretty clear path here. And it's interesting because I was reading the text and it said, you know, one of the issues they have with the Department of Education is that it fosters racist propaganda. And I don't disagree with them on that. I just disagree with which thing is the racist propaganda. There was a Black mother, and I want to say DC, who went viral on TikTok a few years ago because she was talking to the Board of Education about, you know, her Black daughter had to write something in 3rd grade on a test about slavery and racism that she knew wasn't true. But she could either get a bad grade or write the truth. And that, to me, it's already, like you said, it's already happened. It's already here. They want to formalize this as a policy position that propaganda is what we're teaching instead of history. And they call history wokeism. And the problem with that, as someone who was propagandized in this way, I learned, I grew up in a suburban school, mostly white educated, most white teachers, white students, very few people of color. And the lessons that we learned were the lessons that, to my mind, further the problems of our country. It doesn't teach us as white students to take responsibility for the impact of racism and slavery. And when I see other white parents talking about this, it frustrates me because they make it seem like it's a persecution model. And it's not. It's simply saying, like, if we do not learn how our history, we're doomed to repeat it, which we're on track for that. And we can't ever actually move into a new era. I want to move into a new era. And that, to me, means taking responsibility for the impact that we had on Indigenous people and Black people when we founded this country. That means taking responsibility for building a community that genuinely fosters freedom for all, women, queer, trans, disabled, friggin' disabled vets. They aren't taken care of. Like, it, to me, this is the way that some of this stuff gets done out of two sides of the mouth, and it's really problematic. And because what you're talking about, I agree. The Department of Education, I'm on board with them. It's not functioning, but we don't dismantle it. We improve it. We get rid of our conservative snowflakes, if you will, who can't handle the truth, as Jack Nicholson would say. and they just belly up to the table, they eat their vegetables, they get a clue, and we move on to something that's actually functional. Sorry. Anyhow.
I would say, I would like to believe that when people talk about we need to see change in the government, it is not to get rid of it. That's not what people would agree to. Like, okay, let's just get rid of all of that. And dude's like, no. I would love to believe that most people go for a place of how do we make it better? Now, it's a big ship. It takes time to get there, but that can be done. We do know, I shouldn't say we do know. I am very clear that the idea of removing any conversation about gender or race is bullshit. That's what that's called. Plain and simple. Because now you're asking the child who clearly doesn't look like this child to say, hey, I'm just here, but not. There's nothing wrong with discussing gender, and there's nothing wrong with discussing race. And at some point, you have to recognize how the stuff that you have here got here. I mean, we are all on stolen land. Let's just go ahead and put that out there.
Right.
So this whole idea of the fact that they're trying to push certain agendas in terms of discussing, any kind of gender identity, but that's just, But again, that goes to, and let me just say this really quick. Some of the key phrases that they use, like I am, I'll be 49 fairly soon. Woke has been a slang term in the Black community for as long as I have been alive.
Yeah.
Because it was this idea of being awake and being aware and not getting caught up in some dumb stuff, right? So it's always been that somewhere along the line, somebody comes in and takes what we've always used and likes to flip it. But all it says is the fact that you are an adult who acknowledges atrocities, that's a problem. That is the problem. What's wrong with acknowledging that, there is police brutality in certain areas. And yes, there are food deserts. And yes, there is hate crimes. And yes, that's called domestic terrorism. There's nothing woke about that unless it's like, okay, well, now I finally realize my level of privilege. What the hell? Yeah. Wake up already. But we've been like, it's not a new thing, but like with most things, people will try to take what you've used every day and make it into something horrible. That whole critical race theory BS, the fuck y'all talking about?
Yeah.
Like,
well,
what
once
are you
again,
talking about?
It's a rejection. It's interesting to me from a, like, obviously my moral rejection of it is pretty intense. And then my little academic brain is like, that's so interesting because the conservatives that I grew up with were people that believed in taking responsibility. They believed in standing up for what was right, even when it was uncomfortable. They believed in listening to people. Like, I was raised in a different conservative community, and I had a lot of respect for the conservative community. And to be honest, that was a big part of why the whole Trump thing was shocking to me, because I absolutely expected conservative leadership to stand up and say, oh yeah, no, we're not going that far. That's not okay. And instead they jumped on the power wagon. And I realized that wasn't where maybe the majority was, that I had been given a different understanding of conservatism, because that idea of not being afraid to face the truth and to say, oh, okay, this is what's happening. How do we deal with it? How do we show up and deal?
I would, I'm going to agree with you there. There is still this childlike hope that people will not stay silent. It's that whole deal of, if you see something happening, you should say something. It's always the right time to do the right thing, that kind of thing.
I like that. Yeah.
And I thought to myself, there are that many people who would much rather stay silent on the line or jump on the power bandwagon versus saying this is clearly wrong. Shocking.
Right. I'm just the denial of what critical race theory is. Like that, that's what prompted me to talk about that, is that like when you're saying like the fundamental unwillingness to face the facts and say that wokeism is bad. Like, when is being asleep in your public life, like aside from all of the other stuff, just fundamentally, don't we all want to be awake during the day? Don't we want to be looking at what's happening?
Like, and like you want to know that the person you put in office has integrity and character and ethics, and oh wait, they were taking money for what? Wait, what? Because other folks would go to jail for those kinds of behaviors. Yeah. We talk about transparency, but there's a limit on where we want to be transparent.
Right.
I would much rather put my head in the sand and not know that this is happening and not recognize that this is, like, I would much rather do that versus calling a spade or spade. Right.
Well,
I mean, like,
so, and the other piece, like, because you talked a little bit, and we'll talk about it more when we talk about women's rights and bodily autonomy, but this is a teaser for anyone who's listening, which is that if you are pro-life, then wouldn't it be great to be more supportive of life after birth? And because there are absolutely people, even in these horror stories of folks that are unintentionally pregnant, who are like, I would keep a child. I'm have to now. I'm going to live in poverty.
Yeah.
But it's more that, like, I don't feel like I have the resources. So if somebody gets pregnant and we had universal health care, we had some form of living stipend, we had access to education, then that child and that parent would both be able to be healthy, happy, or more content. Can't guarantee happiness, right? But they would have more access to the basics of life that would allow them both to have more personally satisfying lives and also be contributing members of society in a different way. And not to make this about money, because I think it's gross, but the reality is our national GDP suffers because of these policies. And people don't bring this up because so many people are stuck using all their creative energy, all of their wits, all of their cleverness to survive. We don't get that. We don't get that to put on problems like poverty or energy crises, or even just advancement in other forms of technology, medical technology. All of that innovation is going into menial survival as opposed to really creating the next evolution for our country and for people. And I feel, and I think of it in terms of that, but it's also a GDP loss. Like, if we really want to be competitive on the world stage, we need to be investing in our people so that the next amazing innovation can come forward.
I was chatting with Max Blackman of Holy Smoke Olive Oil about 2 years ago, and we were discussing student loan relief. And he said, if people just understood that if you took this weight off of these people's lives, again, how productive they would be in society. Because now they're not just grinding to just stay afloat. They are now giving and participating and bringing their very best to work, to life, to all the things every single day. And yet and still we have this idea of, well, if I did it, they can do it. It's like, everybody can. But again, why should they?
Right. Well, and when you
loan out, stuff happens.
When you give poor people money, they spend it. The economy jumps. When you give rich people money, they keep it. It goes, the trickle down theory is not true. It's
not trickle down by no means.
And I'm not saying everybody who has a loan is poor, but generally, if you're borrowing money to go to school, then you don't have a ton of free cash. And like you said, you're grinding, you're trying to pay that back. You could be spending that on, once again, basic needs, fun things, like building community, you could possibly be able to save and start a business. Like, there's so many things you could be doing with that money other than paying it back in a way that's not going to go back. And it fits. The funny thing is, it fits this conservative agenda just fine. It's like, instead of paying the government, let's pay each other. Like, we agree on that. They talk about how community is the more important thing than government. I agree. I totally agree with you. Community is the more important thing. Let's invest in the community.
Yeah. Well, I hear it. I don't see it.
No, they're not doing it. Yeah, I agree.
But I definitely hear it. But I also think about how it's set up. And when I was a volunteer in a couple of high schools, the teachers would always like crutch their pearls because I would say, you know, no offense, but 4-year education, it's a sham. It's going to cost you like at least 5, 6, maybe 7 years. And you may not even need to go, depending on what you really want to do. But check the program, though. The program is you need to get a college education to get a career that would pay you somewhat of a living salary to eventually pay it back, to eventually get to a place. And it's this awful cycle. Like people aren't borrowing money just to borrow money. The whole idea is it's an investment in my education and I'm going to make more money in the future and blah, blah, blah. And the fact of the matter is that may not be the case.
Right.
When you are like 100, 200 some thousand dollars in debt. And it also isn't the case when you have people who are like, well, in order to get this job, you have to have a bachelor's. But the starting wage for that, the starting wage is only $30,000. It's like, what? Wait,
right.
What?
Well, and
so
why isn't your loan tax deductible? Like your loan should be be able to be written off as a business expense if you need it to get a job. If you need it for a job, you should be able to write it off. Like, and that's not the case. Why? Why is that not the case? But you're right.
Again, do I have a college education? Yes, I do. But for what I wanted to do, what I ended up doing, it required it. Does everybody need it? Hell no. No, they don't. And everybody's not meant to be in school. I mean, I'm surprised I got as far as I got because I'm a grade A slacker. Also
that is so not true. I have worked with you. Girl, you are not a slacker.
So I thought Gwendolyn wanted to be a professor, went back to her alma mater, and was doing the deal and realized I don't even want to be in class as a teacher. I'm that person. Like I am that kind of like, even though I was a scholar, I was second in my high school class. I was, top 5 in college. So I get it. Yeah, I got the brains, but even the brains are like, if I just show up for a couple of classes and look at it, then I can just spit it back out. Do I know it? Yes, I know it, but I ain't got to be here all the time. Like I was just not that kid. I can do the thing the night before and they'd be like, oh my God, Gwendolyn's amazing. Yeah, I know. So do I believe that everybody should go to school? You should get some sort of either a trade or a skill.
Yeah.
Or if it requires education, it requires education. Either way, trade school or whatever. If you need higher education, I believe, yes, make it an investment and write that bitch off because I'm investing in somebody, i.e. me.
Right. That should count.
But we had people believing that education was the only way to get ahead. And then we didn't give people the ways to match that investment. You want me to get all of this to get a job that's entry level, that requires a 4-year degree, and you want to give me $25,000
or free?
That math don't add up.
Unpaid interns, right? Like,
unpaid interns.
And it does add up if what you're doing is creating a pathway for people who already have resources and connections, right?
Yeah.
Like if I have resources and connections and I can live with my uncle and my grandma's going to help pay my bills, I can make 20 grand a year and pay my $150,000 debt.
Yeah.
And that's where like and this just bothers me. And I that's where things like the unwillingness to make things equitable, where the Supreme Court striking down our ability to invest in folks based on known barriers, because we do have a school to prison pipeline. I actually had a woman on my podcast who was like, I want to redefine the pipeline. I want to make it a school to college pipeline. So like co-opt that process. And she and her partner are doing a bunch of cool things. And I'm like, that's great. And it's a systematic problem that we can put Band-Aids on in local situations. But the reality is that the resources needed to be able to take that job that leads to CEO or leads to senator or leads to influencer are not, they're hoarded currently in a very select group. And every time we try to redistribute, there's this like, oh, we're losing out. I'm like, okay, you're not.
You're not.
I get it's going to be a little harder for you. I'm sorry. But like, it's not about you, which seems to be hard to grasp. I don't know. Anyhow, not telling you anything you don't know.
We were about to talk about women. And so one of the second highlights of Project 2025 is the access to abortion drugs, but they will be removed nationwide. Yeah. So it says
mifepristone and misoprostone. I give up. You got it.
We're gonna get it right later on, people. Trust us. By the third or fourth episode, I'm gonna get it right. Project 2025 rejects the premise that abortion is healthcare. It states that FDA should therefore reverse its approval of chemical abortion drugs because the politicized approval process was illegal from the start, right? So it talks about how, there would be an increase, and I think they have been increase in pregnancy-related deaths for Black women, specifically who already suffer from abnormal rates of maternal mortality. And without access to safe abortions, this will negatively impact not only the health of women and girls, but also their ability to pursue education and in turn enter the workforce. This plan would also allow for data tracking of women who travel to receive abortions, which, according to Project 2025, is called abortion tourism. The nerve. Like, we're just out there riding, like, come on, Aicila, let's go find a spot. And like, who, like, really? Seriously? So
they have never had an abortion or known someone who has had one. That's the only thing I can think of. If you can write that, you have no understanding of what that experience is.
And the other part of that too is those drugs are also used to help mothers who have had a miscarriage. They've got to finish the process. And so you use that to finish the process. It's not a vacation. No, it's not some quick, easy kind of thing, right? So there's that. Now, here's what's interesting, though, as I was digging into it. The Comstock Act of 1873. Have you heard of that? Where using the United States Postal Service, they criminalized sending crime inciting matter, certain abortion related matter, and its current modern enforcement is to stop child pornography. However, in the books, there are places where it can stop any kind of abortion drug being sent through the mail. So people think, oh, well, if this happens, I still have access to the mail, even for your banned books, because it's got a lot of details in this act. But there is a way to stop it from even getting to you through the mail under the Comstock Act of 1873. So you were saying earlier that wouldn't it be better to focus on the life after the child is here versus I'm going to force you to have this baby and then you're on your own, which is pretty much what they do.
Right. Well, and also to like make it so that people genuinely have a choice. A pro-choice environment would also support programs that support children and parents and families. Like even families, I had a close friend who had a disabled child, and that family really struggled. We don't have a lot of programs to help those parents. And you've had kids around, like you get tired. And when you have a disabled child, you don't get the same freedom as a parent. And so like really recognizing that so many of the things I say, I agree that we should support families, but I mean that we should provide them material support to be successful and then trust that their contribution is going to be incalculable. Instead of saying, I'm going to decide how you contribute, which is you get a job and you make a certain amount of money and you pay taxes. And I think some of this, like, instead let people surprise you. You have no idea what their potential is. Invest in their ability to show up as a full human and then see what's happening. I bet you'll be amazed. Why don't we do that?
In my heart of hearts, I believe that a good chunk of this this fight against abortion and reproductive health care and just choice, it's not really about the sanctity of life. It is about preserving the Caucasian race. Because if you think about it, in not so very far in the future, they are not going to be the physical majority, which they are not, but still, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it will be very obvious that you are not the majority. There has been a lot of loving across the board. Right? Across the board, there's been some loving. And these kids have all kinds of things going on. Like, it's all kinds of things going on. So you don't have this is very white Anglo-Saxon, was it Protestant? Protestant? Can't remember words out today. I didn't have any kind of cappuccino or macchiato or whatever. So it's all the words. So you ask yourself, how do we stop white women from having abortions? Because it ain't about me. I'm telling you right now, they can care less. The only thing they want, if it was about, say, women of color, is that you would be able to produce a product that would help them with their prison pipeline. That's about as good as it gets for us, because they ain't worried about us. Like, that's not it. That is not it. I mean, they have even talked about that they want to take over. And we don't have IVF in this conversation. We can use that one for the women's rights.
Yeah.
But they have talked about taking over the embryos that are left behind. The state would take them over and then adopt them out, allow people to adopt those kids to keep these snowflake babies safe. Like, they got this plan. But they talk about in Project 2025 saving white lives. Like, it's written. There is nothing about people of color in terms of our livelihood and how we're growing, because we're multiplying. Yeah. We're multiplying and we're crossing over. And typically when you cross over, somebody gets left out. Don't know. No, they know it's exactly why they're doing it.
Yeah.
Somebody gets left out. It's just, it's like,
especially in the community they've created, because it's an us-them community. If we had a community that was the ones that you and I are talking about, it wouldn't be as scary. And I don't know. So no, you're right. I saw something where, and I want to say it was Amy Coney Barrett, how to say her name wrong, that like talked about how, white and Christian women needed to be having more babies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, here's
the
thing. I had babies. I was Christian and I'm still white. And I didn't raise them to be in that mindset, because I reject that. And I love my kids, but that's gross. That is so friggin' gross.
I don't have the chapter, but it is written. They talked about how the numbers have dwindled and how they need to get those numbers up. That's when people tell you who they are, and when they are very clear about it, like, people say, oh my God, that's so insane. Clearly it's not, because they are checking the numbers. They're like, look, we got to do something, because we're not going to be here too much longer. And then what?
Right.
Now, personally, I believe we're all from like Mother Africa, but whatever. So that's
I'm with you on that.
There's the topic.
Everyone I know who's gotten genetics has some African in their genetics. So, like, I mean,
go ahead and embrace the motherland. You can embrace it.
Right.
But we'll dive deeper into that. But they are going all out, and they are going to use the Comstock Act of 1873. There was a conversation. Forgive me for not knowing who said it, but it was very recent, where it was someone saying, if the pro-lifers would just back, even if we lose this part of the fight, we have this in our back pocket. I'm going to find that for us and I'll share it. But people are saying exactly what they want to say, because they figure, well, nobody really cares. And you can be so extreme now that it gets overlooked. What is that? They're saying the quiet part out loud. Is that what they say?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things we talked about right before we started filming that I asked about sharing, so I'm going to share that, is once again, the language is deceptive because, and that's one of the things I really want to point out, is that it's for the people that are like, but some of this sounds good to me. I got you. It does. It sounds good to you because it does. Like we all think the education system has problems. What promise number 2 in Project 2025 is dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. Most of us think the government's a little overbloated. We don't really love the way the bureaucracies cause problems. We agree there's government waste. We are all on the same page. It's like what you said. We all don't want to pay property taxes, right? And so after World War II, Congress and the German and American Congress instituted a plan to exchange students back and forth that was funded by both governments. And I applied for a scholarship when I was in high school and was part of that. So I spent a year in Germany as a high school student, got to learn about German government and history. I was there during unification. So right after the wall fell, it was a really amazing time to be in that part of the world. And I learned a lot. And as part of that, I traveled about a bit because it's inexpensive to go places. And I went to Prague, and they had a lot of stuff left over from the pre-war era. And on this bridge in Prague, I got this guy was like, I have a German coin I'll sell you. And I looked at it and I was like, whoa, it's the Nazi coin. It had the swastika on it. I was like, that's weird. And then all German coins on the outside have writing. They have a little saying. And on the outside of it, it said, Gemeinnütz geht vor Eigennutz. And I was like, the full translation is something like public interest goes before private benefit. But my 16-year-old brain translated it as the good of the many outweighs the good of the few, which is what Spock says at the end of the Wrath of Khan when he sacrifices himself for the ship. And I had this profound moment of cognitive dissonance because I was like, how can a coin with this symbol be saying the same thing that Spock, who I adore because I was a super big geeky Trekkie, said in this movie? And I just stood there, and that's why I bought the coin, because it reminded me, and it reminds me, I think about it a lot, honestly, that any good intention or saying can be misapplied to deception and the abuse of power.
Yeah.
So this idea that we want to dismantle yes, I agree. We should really review things. But for example, one of the things that they want to bring back as part of Project 2025 is the Schedule F executive order that would change thousands and thousands of civil servants from being unionized and protected by the Hatch Act to being political appointees. Yep. And I get it. Like, I understand, like, oh, you're so frustrated because things are, it's hard to make things work when people disagree. But taking away the disagreement doesn't fix the problem, because like what that would mean is the president. And right now, if you're conservative, you're assuming the president's going to be conservative. But just assume that if you're conservative, assume it's going to be a liberal president, and ask yourself, do you want a liberal president being able to divine reality for all of your government agencies? Do you want them to be able to say, this is the truth or you're fired? Because that's what Schedule F will do. And that abuse of power doesn't dismantle the administrative state. It simply makes it significantly more dangerous to anyone who doesn't agree with the people who are in the majority or have the most power. And that is why Project 2025 and the force behind it is so deeply concerning to me. And they use these phrases like protect the family that are a little bit dog whistles, but they also really sound good. Like, yes, I agree. We need to take care of our children. We need to protect families. We need to, but I don't think we should protect them. I think we should support them. But, semantics. And we need to stand for our values. And my value is a community in which everybody can have mutual aid and coexist peacefully, which means, as you said in the beginning, if you have ideas I disagree with, let's not talk about them per se unless we agree to. Just don't try to make me live your ideas. I won't try to make you live mine. But I do believe we should all live the idea of supporting a cohesive society. The end rant.
Well, to move your rant to where that's going, one, They do have a database where they have asked people that when we are ready to go, we want them to. So they've been training these people when they take over to literally step into the spotlight, step into that spot and take out the person who doesn't agree. They have a database, people who are already in with this idea. But here's number 2. The U.S. military would be deployed as law enforcement. Okay, so it says, according to reporting from the Washington Post, Project 2025 authors are preparing to invoke the Insurrection Act to legally allow the U.S. military to be deployed for domestic law enforcement. This idea was reportedly proposed to Trump in 2020 during the George Floyd protests, but he turned it down, then has since expressed regret for that decision. I don't even know why anyone would think that would be a good idea. Ever.
Thank you. That's a full statement right there.
Yes.
Why would anyone think that's a good idea?
Why would that be? And it's interesting that it's called the Insurrection Act. Forget the fact that they tried to run a coup.
Right.
And everybody was able to just go home and get arrested later. But you know what? Let me not say that. Let me go ahead and say, when people still talk about January 6th, it baffles me. It doesn't that there are persons who don't look like me who often say, why is everything about race? Everything is about race. Well, it hadn't been anybody other than, as I said before, they would still be cleaning the blood off of those steps. Yeah, we all know it. And the fact that you can say something like that and act as if race doesn't have any kind of impact on what we do today. Everything is impacted by race, not because we chose it. It fucking created it. You created this foolishness, so now you have to live with it. Had you not done it, we wouldn't be in this boat today. We wouldn't even be here. Because kids, when they're out the womb, they don't know that they're different. Kids will play with each other like it's nothing. It's the adults.
Yeah.
Teach them, hey, he's an other. She's an other. You should be careful. It's like, but I've been playing with Johnny all my life. Johnny and I like chocolate chip cookies. Kids don't come out that way. They are none the wiser. Zero. So when we talk about these situations that have happened, and we talk about race because history has shown us. Had it been us, those Black Lives Matter protests, and actually they weren't really protests. Well, you are protesting against police brutality, so.
Right.
But there were also marches. There was one in my neighborhood, extremely peaceful. Not a problem. It was like, look, at a certain point, I'm just tired of getting shot at for no goddamn reason. I just want to get in my car, get to where I got to get to and call it a day. I don't want to have to be pulled over.
Right. Or to be afraid of being pulled over. Like, that's the thing is like the fact that having a traffic violation has a possibility of leading to severe consequences of violence up to and including death. Like, that creates what you could go all the way back to where you started. That creates a fear state.
But you don't even have to have a traffic violation.
Right. Oh, so sorry. A made up traffic violation. Well, like you driving while black. I apologize. I didn't say it correctly.
No, you're good.
You're right. That's important.
If I may add in there, my cousin's wife is Caucasian. And I remember her sharing, and they live in Michigan. I remember her sharing that when they drove to Texas, they got pulled over. Forgot what state. So they pulled my cousin over. Sweetest guy ever. Their kids in the car. They pulled her off to the side and said, ma'am, are you in any trouble? Are you here on your own will? I said, the idea that this white woman is in some sort of trouble because she's got a black man in the driver's seat. Wow. Now, this wasn't like 50 years ago. It's like maybe 2 years ago that she's sharing this story.
Yeah.
So when people talk about, why is it always about race? Because I don't know. When I walk out of my door, I'm walking back in this bitch.
Yeah.
As I told a dear colleague, because he didn't understand, it is always hunting season. Yeah. Always. And so we operate differently for that fact. So you're now telling me that you want to use the US military as local law enforcement? So when people are protesting against very obvious atrocities, you want to sick them on us?
Yeah. Well, the right to free assembly, and once again, like what you said before, is already here. I was appalled when Occupy Wall Street led to massive camping bans. I'm like, how does that not abridge our right to free assembly?
Right.
Like, what are you doing? To be able to have a sit-in is like a core part of how we moved ourselves into although someone recently pointed out that the Civil Rights Act was not signed until like the 8th day of rioting. So all the sit-ins, all the protests, everything, really, they didn't pay attention until things got violent. And that's disheartening on every level. But the reality is that, we're seeing it right now. The students that are protesting the Palestinian genocide are being denied the right to free assembly. The college campuses are calling cops on their own students.
Yeah. It's like, wait a minute, what?
And it's just like, when you talk about like the fact, like if you look at our history, and I recognize that I'm doing something a little weird, which is saying, I'm just asking you to believe your own words. Like, if you really believe in the founding fathers and you believe that our country is founded on this right to representation for taxation, then we should have a wider degree of diversity in our representation. And if you believe that the civil disobedience that the revolutionaries engaged in was righteous, then a sit-in and a peaceful march seem to be equally valid forms of civil disobedience. Like, that is how the people can communicate without being violent. And yet, while we have this rhetoric that we have a respect for that, our actions show a very different approach.
Very different. Very different approach. It's like, well, I just said it. I didn't really mean it. I mean, like, don't take me up on it. But let me.
I said it, but I didn't mean it.
Funny. I mean, it's how like things are so off the cuff. You're like, I just gotta laugh this off because it can't be this. Like, this is insane. But let me do this. Because I'm looking at like how our conversation. Let me point out a few more points, but I want to end on a really big one, a big one for me. Okay. And then, so we know that the Environmental Protection Agency would be downsized. They have already clearly been attacking diversity and inclusion programs, but then government agencies would be cut. They're already doing that. The Department of Homeland Security would be dismantled, which means, how they work on keeping out disinformation and lies. Yeah, that's going to go away because we don't need that. They would also look at climate change and renewable energy priorities would be removed from the Department of Agriculture. They don't want to deal with that. But here's the one that gets me. And I say it every single time. They would have a focus on traditional Christian view of marriage. Project 2025 states families comprised of a married mother, father, and their children are the foundation of a well-ordered nation and healthy society. Unfortunately, family policies and programs under President Biden are fraught with agenda items focusing on LGBTQ plus equity, subsidizing single motherhood, disincentivizing work, and penalizing marriage. These policies should be repealed and replaced by policies that support the formation of stable, married, nuclear families. They also intend to reinstate a transgender military ban and limit civil protections for LGBTQ plus people in the workplace. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the military ban and work my way back.
Okay.
I'm gonna say it.
I'm here for it.
Body who wants to put their life on the line. And forgive me, dear Lord, for your bitch ass. That's the last thing you should be trying to ban. I'm just saying. Just, because somebody has to care for this country so much that they are willing to go and die for people they don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
People who treat them less than, people who want to harm them. They get up every day and do it. And you're like, we should probably ban them from being in the military because what? Somebody wants to die for you. You don't want to do it. He doesn't want to do it. She doesn't want to do it, but this person does because they believe in what this country stands for. And your suggestion is yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with that one. And then I'm going to talk about family because family is just what it is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're born in a really good spot and you get your father, your mother, and all the things. And sometimes you get a deck of cards, but you only get one of the two. Or maybe you lose two. So you got your grandmother or your grandfather or your auntie to raise you. That does not mean that family is not stable and not secure and not sharing the same values that you may very well value in your family. It does not mean that. By no means. The whole idea that they think that they're subsidizing single motherhood and disincentivizing work. I didn't bring my numbers, but most of the folks who are getting welfare are Caucasian. So when this goes, I'm gonna have my chart up with all the numbers because that's who benefits. But like we're still using these age-old stereotypes to say, well, you don't want your hard-earned money to go to so-and-so because they don't want to work. People want to work. They also want to get paid fairly for their work and be valued for their work.
Well, right, and let's not even, no, I love that. And I want to piggyback on that and say, yes, they want to be fairly paid. They want to be able to afford, groceries and healthcare. And sometimes, and this is once again, the thing that kind of breaks my brain, like you can't work because you have a disabled child or an aging parent or a sick spouse, and you need to be able to take care of them. And like, if you're a white Christian person doing it, that's fine. Right? Like somehow we're okay with that. But if you're poor and you're not white and Christian and you need some support in order to be able to do that, then somehow now you're taking a handout. And it's like, no, like we have all sorts of tax credits for businesses. My grandfather was like tested with Agent Orange or something. I don't even know. He got it was one of our wars. And so my uncles and my dad all got some kind of money from the government. They would never call that a handout, but it made a huge difference for them in their ability to like start their businesses and move forward. The GI Bill wasn't applied to Black soldiers. Like, what? And so when we talk about this stuff, we talk about reparations, and it's like, yeah, we gave reparations to the white plantation owners. So we are fine with all of these handouts. And then to go back to what you said before, that's why we have to talk about race, because either we have a policy that we apply fairly and everyone has access to it, or we have an issue that mostly seems to be racial. Like, I don't see a difference between a Black veteran and a white veteran that isn't the race. So why did the white veterans get the GI Bill? Somebody explain it to me, and don't talk about race. I don't think you can, but I put that challenge out there. If you're listening and are like, I got you, go ahead. But I am going to be checking your facts. Let's be clear. Because that's the problem is, we cannot keep going back to these self-delusions and expect to move our country forward. Yeah.
And believe in the lies, because when people talk about welfare, they have been given the story of some Black single mother or some crackhead Black guy, and they don't want to work, and that's why they need your handouts. That is not how that shit started.
No, it's not. Reagan made that up completely. But I just go back to, and this, I know that this takes me away for some of the conservative folks, but you know, they talk about socialism, and I'm just like, well, let's go back to good investments. Let's talk about your ROI. So they did a study in California on a homeless man. They call it, his name was Murray. They followed him for a year. And this was like 18 years ago. And he cost the city that he lived in $1 million in 1 year. $1 million. Now, if you do Housing First, which is a program that doesn't require people to be off any kind of drugs or anything, they just give them housing first. Those programs at the time cost about $50,000 a person, including housing, shelter, food, and a social worker. Oh. So $50,000 a year versus $1 million. And then additionally, most of the people who are in Housing First programs cycle out of homelessness, like 80% of them, within about 5 years. They go on, because a lot of times the homelessness is the result of trauma, loss, vulnerability. But when they have some stability in their lives, they're able to deal with the things that are causing their addiction issues. They're able to get a job, because try to get a job without being able to take a shower and give someone a phone number, and you will understand the problems. It is not just that they're hungry. It is that they are fundamentally blocked from moving forward. So take away the fact that that's a more humane approach. Like you don't want to talk about handouts. You don't want to talk about being humane. Let's just talk about effectiveness and financial return. If you invest in Housing First, it is more effective and it is financially less expensive. Period. End of story. I can give you numbers on many programs that are similar to that. And that is the lie that I hate the most, because they talk about being fiscally conservative. I'm like, if you are fiscally conservative, you would invest in programs that reduce our overall budgetary needs in the long term. And most things that work effectively do require an upfront business investment. Ask anybody, you know, when you're in your house, what do? You get a new roof before the roof starts leaking, and you have to repair everything in the house. Like, it is good money management to invest in maintenance and proactive engagement to move your business, your home, your life forward. Why can't we apply these same very practical ideologies to how we run our government? And the upside for me is that they are also more humane. Like, we're not leaving some guy to run around and have crisis after crisis so that we spend $1 million on him. He got a house, he's food, he has shelter, he's a social worker. Why is that controversial or radical? I don't even know that I consider, I mean, yes, technically it's probably socialism, but I'm like, I mean, I'm okay with that. Like, let's be clear, I'm not anti-socialist, but for the people that are, I'm like, explain to me how a good investment is a bad idea.
Yeah. Because it's not like folks are going to say, well, let me just quit my job and do this like that. That's not the case.
That's not how it happens.
Because people do attach their value, like the value of their life, to their work. And so when you don't have a job, you start feeling less than, and not a partner who can contribute into like the household, someone who's not contributing to like their community. It does impact you emotionally and mentally. There's only a very small set of people who want to be gold diggers and loafers.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm okay with them getting away with it. Honestly, I feel like if we're helping 80 people and 20 of them are taking advantage, I literally don't care, which I know is a little controversial as well. But I'd rather help 80. Honestly, I'd rather help 30 and let 70 take advantage. I still think we'll be better off. Oh, yeah, I think we'll be happier as societies. We'll have a lower crime rate. Yes. That's one of the main things that has consistently been shown to reduce the crime rate is socioeconomic equity. Yeah. Why don't we do that? I don't know. I guess we like crime.
It's too much like right. It's too much like right. Okay, so let's do this, because we gotta wrap this bad boy up.
Sorry.
What are our next steps? Like, what do we propose we do? I'm proposing, and I'll let you share what you shared in our notebook. I'm proposing that we do start getting around the dinner table, the domino table, and a lot of other smaller conversations, and talk about this. It is gaining traction, but I am still seeing a lot of people saying this is just facade. It's not real. I'm thinking, you can go download it. It's free to download. You ain't got to pay for it.
Yeah, we'll put a link with it, and we'll put a link with this with clips. We'll put it in the show notes. You
The more people, I believe, who talk to their loved ones, their friends, and say, hey, I'm not trying to sway your vote. I'm not doing that. But I need you to be aware of how important this is. And it's not just this election. They have played the long game for a very long time.
Yeah.
So it is, we need to get active again for all the things moving forward. Because the moment you fall asleep, there he goes.
Right. I think that's hugely important. And I also think we need to stop focusing on the presidential election. Like I think that it's a dog and pony show that has distracted us from making real change. If the president was going to make real change, that would have happened 20 years ago. And I don't know if you know Utah Phillips. He's a great folk singer. And he said, I belong to the sloth and indolence party. If I get elected, I'm not going to do anything because you guys got to get together and do it yourself. And I feel like whether they say it or not, that's what we need. We need to get together and do it ourselves. And I really feel like between now and November, however you want to vote in the presidential election.
Yeah.
I personally feel like staving off Project 2025 for at least 4 more years, because I absolutely believe they would try to throw it under a liberal banner if they could. I think trying to stave it off for 4 more years is a good idea. And I understand people who are like, but the Democratic Party has not shown up. So that I respect that. But, and also get involved, call your representative, call your senator. I don't care if they are your party or not. Make the effort to tell them you are concerned, that you do not want Army troops at your door and in your parks dragging people around. Like, that is not the America that we stand for. That you're concerned about civil servants being politicized to the point where facts will become whatever the majority party thinks. Because if you are okay, just for a minute, think about whatever the other ideology is and think to yourself, if they were telling me what reality is, would I be happy with that? And if you wouldn't be, then do what you can to oppose this, because this is what that is going to lead to.
Oh, yeah.
Most of us, I don't think, really want that when we think about it, but we forget, we get stuck in our own idea. So, completely. And I wrote a letter to my representative. I'll put that in the show notes as well. Like, if anyone wants to try, like, it's not great, it's something.
But it's 2 parts. It goes back to, yes, we need to do that part, but then we have to do our part, because we haven't done our part, which is how we got here in the first place. It is, yes, let me stop for the next 4 years, but in those 4 years that we
have to keep working.
We got to keep working and get back.
You can't just vote and go home. Exactly. I think that's the thing, is people are like, voting doesn't work. And I'm like, just voting doesn't work.
Doesn't do it, because these policies, that database, I've already said it. Oklahoma already has it being proposed. So trust, they're not waiting for someone to win. They're like, we can start this stuff right now. It's already happening in your state. So it's not this is like, no, this is big picture. Go smaller, and recognize what your state is doing.
Well, and I do want to add one other thing. One of the things that happens for all of us is we get overwhelmed. We look at the problems and they're so big, and we think there's nothing I can do that matters. And you're right. You yourself are not going to solve the biggest problem. That's a fact. You can solve a problem right now in the world you're in. And if you take that attitude, if you say, let me look around and let me do one thing today to relieve one person's burden, let me make one phone call that will help someone. If, whenever I'm not disabled, so when I go to a theater and I see they don't have any disability access, I always say something to the manager like, hey, I noticed you don't have any disability access, because probably disabled people don't go there. So they're never going to say anything. And so I can do that. That's a privilege I have. And people often think of privilege as being like, oh, I'm the boss, I'm the governor. No, everyone has a privilege somewhere. You have power and influence somewhere. Use it to provide support and access, and to make a difference, to make someone's life just a little easier. And that, I think, that will make a huge difference.
That's awesome. That's a great way to end it.
Thank you.
That's a great way to end it. So we'll talk about
bodily autonomy next.
Bodily autonomy and women's rights.
Yeah.
Oh.
And access to guns, because that fits kind of under bodily autonomy.
We're gonna put access to guns.
I'll tease it. I feel like if you listen to like liberal and conservatives talk about access to abortion and access to guns, and you switch the nouns, they're very similar conversations.
Oh my goodness. So how do we close it out? We've never closed this out.
We never close this out.
What do we say? So
thanks for listening. Take some of these talking points to your next dinner conversation. We challenge you.
We definitely challenge you. Somebody not gonna get invited again.